Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for August 28th, 2024. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. It sounds like I've been talking a lot into this particular microphone venue for a little while now. And, when I actually remind myself to sit down and ping all the people that said, hey, I should have him on the podcast, or hey, I should have him on the podcast. It's amazing what happens when that happens. Everybody says yes, and then I got to schedule all of this stuff, and then we get a lot of episodes all at once, and that's kind of what's happened in the last 10 days or so. And, again, no complaints here because, I get a chance. I'm privileged to chat with is a fucking blast. And before I bring Marty on, I've got some housekeeping to take care of. So I'll be speaking again this year at the Expat Money Show put on by Mikkel Thorup, who I had the great pleasure of meeting when I was up in Edmonton earlier this year for Sean Newman's Cornerstone Forum. The event that he's putting on will be from October 7th through the 11th. It's one of the biggest expat convocations in the world. Now, this is a free event, and personally, I'll be speaking there twice, once by myself and once as a part of a panel with Alex Craner and Bob Murphy. So there will be people there like Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton. Tom Woods is going to be there. So is Mark Faber. This should be an excellent show, and it should help you learn everything you need to know about crafting a potential plan B, and that's if you need one. Or if you're just looking for a way to preserve some of your liberty and or your wealth at a time as uncertain as this period in history, well, then this could be the show for you as well. This includes things like getting a second passport or Marty Bent is offshore finances. It could just be that you want to invest in some Bitcoin real estate. Podcast TFTC. The folks that are there will be able to help you with all. He's always been very good and gracious to me, so I really wanted to have him on. Head over to expatmoneysummit.com and you can sign up there. We have a promo code, and the link will be in the show notes for this podcast. Marty Bent is the host of the very popular Bitcoin podcast, TFTC. I've been on the show a couple of times. He's always been very, very good and gracious to me, so I really wanted to have him on here. And do that now. He's back from parts unknown, apparently, and he's here to just kind of chat about whatever. I'm not sure where we're going to go today, but all that matters is that Marty's here and he's in the house and we're doing the thing. Marty, hope you're doing well. How are you, sir?
More than well. Any day that I get to sit down and talk with you is a good day. So
that's very kind. So apparently you just got back from, was it Latvia,
Riga, Latvia.
Wow. And what was going on out there? I know that because I saw a tweet from you that was like, that's interesting. Marty comes back and says, we're going to win, putting on his Bitcoin hat. When he said that, I'm like, I wonder why. So
no, so in Riga, part of the world I never thought I'd find myself in until I got into Bitcoin. But the Baltic Honey Badger Conference is thrown out there and has been since 2017, hosted by a company in the space called Hodl Hodl, and now another company behind that, Debify. The founder, Max, started Hodl Hodl and then went to start Debify. They leverage Bitcoin multi-sig to bring trading and lending services to people in a non-custodial way, which is pretty cool. But long story short, at this conference, I first went in 2018, and having been to hundreds of Bitcoin conferences at this point, it feels like this is always my favorite. So it's my fourth time back. It's no bullshit. Right. Like, how are we going to build out this network and make sure that Bitcoin is sufficiently robust? You have a lot of hard conversations. One of the panels I hosted was called Unpopular Opinions, and I've done that 3 times now. And on that panel, we talk about the uncomfortable truths within Bitcoin that people like to shy away from. But this conference really forces you to focus on it and say, hey, where can we be better? And so every time I've been, it always reignites that fire in my belly as it pertains to Bitcoin and the potential we have to really bring about a new monetary standard in the digital age. And
right.
I know there's a lot of naysayers out there, but I truly do believe that Bitcoin is one of the most important tools that we have at our fingertips to actually affect change moving forward.
It's funny. I get lumped into the category sometimes with the naysayers because I refuse to, align myself with any kind of religious fanaticism. And whenever I see any kind of religious fanaticism, I just kind of shy away from it and move around. And so, that's been my argument in some ways. I actually want to touch on what you just. I wanted to drill in a little bit what you just said, but this is like I Bitcoin maxis bother me the same way that gold bugs bother me, the same way that wokenistas bother me, the same way that I don't know, Kamala Harris bothers me. It's like there's a certain point where true believers lose their perspective, and this is one of those things. So you mentioned uncomfortable truths, and I'm like, now that's a panel I would have liked to have been, on a fly on the wall for. So talk to me about some of the uncomfortable truths, if you don't mind. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But if you do, I'd love to hear some of what you think are the uncomfortable truths about where we stand in Bitcoin right now.
I mean, the first one that we talked about on the panel was the state of the mining pool layer of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And so for anybody who's listening is unfamiliar with how Bitcoin mining works at scale today, the amount of hashes you need to produce a hash that allows you to add a block of transactions and therefore get the block reward in Bitcoin is immense. And so smaller miners have a minuscule probability of actually plugging a machine into mining a block. And so as time has gone on and hash rate has grown, you need to pool your hash with a bunch of other miners and then have that pool. An individual miner within that pool will find a block, and then you'll split up the rewards amongst everybody within that pool commensurately with the amount of hash rate that they're producing. Right. And we're at a point now in Bitcoin where there's essentially two pools that control probably about 60% of the network hash rate, which is not ideal.
No, it's not.
And it's an uncomfortable truth that many people within Bitcoin are aware of and are actively trying to fix, but it's something that people don't like to bring up. And but it exists, and I think it's just part of the growing pains. Pools are notoriously terrible businesses, very thin margin, and that has enabled these two pools, particularly Ampool and Foundry, to amass a massive amount of hash rate, which makes many people uncomfortable, myself included. But I think it's just a product of the economics of mining pools and the business advantages that those two pools have specifically. And I do think it can be solved in the future, but and it will be solved. But it's just we need to deal with this uncomfortable truth and really try to work in a way that distributes hash rate, particularly at the pool layer, away from these two pools.
So I'm interested to hear what you think is one of the potential solutions for that. I haven't really thought about this stuff in a long time. I used to mine Bitcoin and other shit coins as part of pools and whatnot. I've done that at the individual user level. I haven't done so in 4 or 5 years, but it would just be interesting to hear what you have to say about that, because this is something I haven't really thought about very much recently. I've had a few other things on my mind. So
yeah, I think the solution to this is twofold, but it's really highly dependent on the first. I think we need to rethink, most pools out there need to rethink how a pool should actually come to be in the first place. A lot of pools that are out there start first with a pool, which again is a terrible business. And if you look at the two pools that are dominating right now in Ampool, well, first let's describe the problem. So you have Ampool and Foundry that have a lot of the hash rate. And if you look at the hash rate breakdown chart, Ampool actually won't seem that big, but what's going on behind the scenes, which has been laid bare over the last 6 months, is that you have a number of pools that look like they're individual businesses that are actually proxying into Ampool, and Ampool is dictating the block template of those other pools that don't show up on the hash rate breakdown as Ampool. And this is a capital problem. So again, miners pull their hash together to get more consistent payouts due to how hard it is to find a hash that'll allow you to mine a block. But the pool industry is also gravitated towards a particular payout scheme. And so over the last 7 years, there's been two predominant payout schemes: PPLNS, pay per last end shares, and then FPPS, full pay per share. And they both come with trade-offs. PPLNS, pay per last end share, basically forces individual miners to stomach variance risk. And so a PPLNS pool, you're not getting paid out every day. You're getting paid out once that pool mines a block. And the trade-off there is you're stomaching that variance due to streaks of bad luck. You could go a couple days, a week even, without finding a block, without generating revenue, but you make that trade-off because you're going to get your full share of the block reward of that block that's mined. And then over the last 4 years, particularly, the overwhelming majority of pools have shifted to FPPS. And the trade-off that's made with FPPS payout schemes is that you get paid out every day, but you don't reap the full block reward. That's the trade-off you make. You get paid out on a trailing, and the average of a trailing n amount of blocks, that's what you get paid out. But you get paid out every day. And as mining becomes more industrialized, the bigger players, particularly the publicly traded players, need that type of payout scheme because they have financial statements and investor relations calls that they have to deal with, and they need that consistent revenue. And so now to the crux of the problem, the pools that are proxying into AMP pool have essentially, if you're running an FPPS pool, you need a large Bitcoin treasury because you're technically taking on credit risk as you're paying out every day. And a lot of these pools that went FPPS because their clients demanded it did not have a big enough treasury to support that model. And so they've found themselves in a position where they have to go to the central bank of AMP pool. And AMP pool, for those who are unaware, is essentially a sub company of Bitmain, which is the dominant player in the Bitcoin mining ASIC realm. Most Bitcoin miners are coming from Bitmain. So Bitmain, the hardware company, has a war chest because of their hardware sales, and they're able to leverage that war chest within AMP pool to become essentially a central bank of the pool ecosystem. And so all these smaller FPPS pools that don't have the luxury of that treasury have had to come hat in hand to AMP pool and say, hey, can we leverage your treasury to pay out our customers every day? And the trade-off they made with AMP pool seems to be, it's not explicit. You can only imply this by looking at blocks as they're mined from particular pools, is that AMP pool said, all right, you can leverage our treasury, but you're going to have to use the block template that we decide and these transaction prioritization lists that we like as well. And so that's not good. You don't want Bitmain essentially owning a large share of the hash rate and dictating what other pools put in their blocks. So that's scary. It's uncomfortable.
That is uncomfortable. That's kind of the whole point of Bitcoin, right? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the whole thing. It's kind of like those works again. And this is one of those things that it's funny. I go all the way back to when I was, playing around with various in the crypto space back in 2016, 2017. And I remember having a long conversation and reading a lot of posts from a guy who said that back on Steemit ages ago, talking about how, proof of work was ultimately, is going to tend in this direction. He wasn't actually making an argument for pools for proof of stake either, FYI. He was just saying that this was, the problem that eventually, proof of work is going to become a roll the capital up the hill problem because of the difficulty number, because of and I'm not, and I'm going to do a bad job of paraphrasing his argument because I haven't read this stuff in 7 years, but it feels like as you were talking about this is what came back to mind. So I'm now bringing that up as, was he right? Was he wrong? Is this, was this part of is this always going to be a rich get richer kind of scenario, or, are there, as you suggested, ways of dealing with this problem and working out how to make sure that doesn't happen and re-democratize the proof of work model?
Yeah,
because that's what it feels like.
No, I think it's important to highlight a couple things here. One, while this is a big problem, like that's the beauty of Bitcoin and the design of proof of work, is it's trivial to opt out. So if you recognize that a pool is amassed too much hash rate or is or is censoring transactions within a block, you can trivially point your hash rate somewhere else, either at another pool, or you could decide to self-mine and stomach the variance risk. And so you always have that sort of nuclear option as an individual operator. And it's important to clarify that the pool operators don't have control over the individual miners that are pointing their hash at these pools. And so you do have that easy exit at the individual miner level, which will always exist and won't go away. The second thing is, it's become abundantly clear to me, at least, that this is a capital problem, right? Like this treasury that Ampool has is essentially the central bank that everybody's going to. And so maybe there needs to be unique credit structures set up, maybe credit funds that go to pools that are proxying into Ampool and say, hey, we'll let you tap into our treasury and you can decide what block template you create, and you don't have to bend the knee to one of your competitors in Ampool. And then 3, so I said 2, but it's really 3-part. Again, going back to Foundry and Ampool specifically, like if you look at their businesses, again, going to Ampool, they have Bitmain behind them with their massive hardware business that allows them to use the pool as a loss leader. And then Foundry, similarly, they have Genesis trading desk and the family of DCG companies. That's what Foundry spun out of. And so they have alternative strong revenue streams that they can they can lean on. And so with those two things in mind, like, again, rethinking how pools come to be in the first place, like, I think it's becoming clear to me, at least, that you need a pool should be a secondary business on top of something else that you're already providing. So a good example of a pool I could see come to market is like Block, formerly Square. They've just released their first 3-nanometer ASIC chip and have begun selling that to miners in the space, Core Scientific specifically. And so if they have a really good business line there in the ASICs, it's yet to be determined because we haven't seen them delivered at scale and plugged in for an amount of time. But you can imagine a scenario where that business line is successful for them.
Right.
And then they can then go out and on the shoulders of that successful hardware business, launch a pool that competes with the other pools. And then third, the other option, which many people are working on as well, is just rethinking pools altogether in terms of how they're actually formed. So there's a lot of talk and discussion about restarting something like P2 pool, which existed in the early days of Bitcoin pools, which is a peer-to-peer pool where you pull your hash and then you put an address into the pool interface, and once a block is mined, you just distribute rewards from the Coinbase transaction directly. Again, that comes with variance and scale problems, but people are working to sort of retool that and bring it back to market. But yeah, I think it's definitely a problem. I don't think it's an existential threat yet. Not sure it will get there, again, because of that ease of exit that each individual miner has. And if you think about it from a game theoretical perspective, like, if these pools actually want to have businesses in the long run, like, their incentive shouldn't be to acquire as much hash rate as possible. They could kill the golden goose at the end of the day. And historically, we do have one example of this playing out, which was 2015. There was a pool called Ghash that amassed, I believe, 55% of the network hash rate. And within 18 months, they were out of business because people recognized, and it was of no fault of their own, they just had really good software, and people liked the experience of pointing their hash at that pool. But people started sounding the alarm bells at some point in 2015 that they had 55% of hash, and the actors within the network acted rather quickly and pointed their hash elsewhere, to the point where it actually destroyed Ghash's business. And so you do have historical precedent for people reacting to this threat.
Well, then the bigger question becomes, and this is one of the things that has, when I think about when I think about Bitcoin where it is today, and I think, regulatorily how the powers that be are trying to work around it or deal with it or control it or whatever. I've seen, I've not been unhip to, what they're trying to do. Like, why do the ETFs exist? Why why the futures markets exist, why all of these things happen. And I'm like, it's very clear that someone wants to control Bitcoin. They know they can't, they think let me put it to you this way. I know the people who have controlled gold and silver, and I don't understand what their business model looks like. I understand what they're doing in the oil markets today. I've talked about at length. I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but for the last couple of years, it's very, very clear that the oil market has been purposefully volatilized in order to wash small speculators out of the marketplace, so that you only wind up with a very small group of people basically running the oil markets. And I saw it just as a function of volatility. The more I talk about it, the more I have people come to me and say, it's exactly what's happening. I'm watching the oil pits, they're a freaking mess. The term structure is all a mess. Everything's a mess. And so my point being is that the threat that I've always seen to Bitcoin as a thing is whether or not these people believe enough of their own bullshit to believe that they can do to Bitcoin what they've done to every other market in the past, by effectively trying to get a hold of as much of the Bitcoin as possible, and therefore as much of the hash rate as possible, and effectively take it over. Their mindset is, if we control all the gold and we control the flow of physical gold, we can control the futures price of gold, and therefore we can manipulate everything. And so, for example, what I'm seeing now with all of these dumps by government agencies, they're dumping all these governments are dumping all these Bitcoins to try and bomb the price, to try and shake hodlers out of their positions. And we're just like, really? That's not working. This is, again, so I was literally saying this morning on my market report for my people. I said, I give the Bitcoin maxis a lot of shit, but in this respect, when you see that 65% of the Bitcoins in the world haven't moved in the last freaking year, and all these massive dumps on the price and all this negative press, and you're like, oh, really? Thanks for putting Bitcoin on sale. Appreciate that. We'll keep buying them from you. And that's where the hodlers, that's where the Bitcoin maxis and the true believers actually, are a positive force on the market, right? So yeah. I don't know if I'm wrong in looking at it that way, and if I am, throw it out there.
No, and I think this is like the ineffectiveness of attempts to basically either number one, control price, manipulate price, or shake holders out of their position, is part of the beauty of Satoshi's design, particularly the aggressive early distribution, like starting with a block reward of 50 and 25. So you had half the amount of Bitcoin that will ever exist distributed in the first 4 years.
Right.
And now we're at a point where 19.6 million have been distributed. There's 1.4 left to mine, less than 1.4 million left to mine. And I think due to the nature of the nascency of the protocol and the industry, more importantly, during those early years when most of Bitcoin was being distributed, like, people were forced to figure out a way to hold their own Bitcoin. And so we find ourselves in a situation where, as it stands today in 2024, despite the fact that you have ETFs, you have BlackRock, Fidelity, you have a pretty robust and compliant industry that has been built out. Like, despite all of that, most Bitcoin sits in wallets that individuals control. And that's just due to the nature of the supply schedule that Satoshi set forth when he launched the protocol. And I think that's actually a very underappreciated aspect of the design, is that he essentially forced it so most Bitcoin get out pretty quickly before anybody's paying attention. And since there's no robust industry to make it relatively easy for people to hold, or there wasn't a robust industry for people to secure their Bitcoin, it forced them to take self-custody. And even if there were companies that presented themselves as a way to make it easy, a lot of them blew up and sort of scared people into self-custody as well. So
that makes sense. That's a really good point. I had never really thought about it that way, but I think it is a very important point that the amount of Bitcoin, it's like being able to, but again, at the end of the day, I think it's still the somebody out there still believes that there's a 51% attacker. That there's some way to effectively 51% attack Bitcoin. That's what these people are thinking. And again, I'm not saying that that they're going to be successful. That's not what I'm getting at here. I'm just kind of playing a little bit of devil's advocate. I'm actually talking their perspective, because as you know, as we go forward here, we really have to remind ourselves that geopolitics and in general, it's kind of easy once you start thinking like a pedophile, power hungry oligarch. It's not really tough. Like once you think like them, you have to then you can predict what they're going to do next. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm not advocating one position or another. I'm not saying Bitcoin isn't capable of this or not capable of it. I wouldn't say a believer. Again, hard to like. I like Bitcoin. I own Bitcoin. I wish I owned more. I wish I hadn't squandered the Bitcoins I had during the aggressive rollout period. Like all of those things, right? I'm that guy. But at the same time, like, you know, I always just remind myself that there's always that 5 to 10% skepticism that you should always have about everything at all times, because that's how you ultimately, in the long run, I think, steelman your argument for it. And it sounds like have conferences like you're having over in Latvia, trying to figure out how we're going to fix any of the problems as they emerge in each, you know, but at the same time, maybe kind of, but still trust the system that has evolved.
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing I appreciate about Bitcoin culture, whether you define it as Bitcoin maximalism, religious zealotry, cult-like activity, which certainly exists. I like to think like I'm, it exists on a spectrum too, and I feel like I fall somewhere in the middle of that spectrum.
That's the way I feel.
That's what I think most people on the outside don't realize is like the hardest critics of Bitcoin are within Bitcoin. And despite what you may see on Twitter or YouTube or wherever, CNBC, even of people pumping number go up and we're going to Valhalla, it certainly exists, and I've been guilty of doing it myself. But at the same time, there is a part of the Bitcoin network, people within it, that are hypercritical of all the technical and economic decisions that are made at different layers. And that's another point that gives me confidence, is that there are certainly the religious zealots and the maxis who see that or envision that there's nothing wrong with Bitcoin, that it's some pristine protocol and network that is perfect right now. But for every one of those that is loud on social media or CNBC, there's at least one, if not more, behind the scenes who don't get as much tick, that are like, all right, how the fuck are we gonna make this happen?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And you would be in a better position than me to take the temperature of that room, because I'm not in that room. I just bring these things up, and then of course have to, you know, deal with the slings and arrows of the idiots that are actually doing Bitcoin, I think, at the service. And it's the same thing I say to gold bugs. It's like, look, you're actually doing these asset classes that you care about, or these concepts or these ideas that you care about. As an old Austrian economist, and as an old, you know, as a maybe former libertarian, however you want to put it, where I am at this point on the spectrum, certainly of a former large L libertarian, like that, fuck those people. You know, these ideas are precious. These concepts are precious, and they're important, and they require both prudence and temperance in how you present them to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world doesn't see the world the way you do. And, you know, you have to present that to them practical solutions about why this, why that, and you have to get them over the psychological hump of changing their frame of reference completely. And it's not just as simple as like the red pill, blue pill thing. This is a very delicate psychological process that you want to be sensitive to if you actually want to change hearts and minds. It's just the way things are. And, you know, that doesn't make people stupid. It doesn't make them sheep. It doesn't make them anything else. It makes them people. And you either want to engage with them, Spurg boy, or you don't, is basically my argument. So
I was going to bring up the Spurg boy thing. There's a lot of Spurgs that tend to Spurg out. And no, I've witnessed, I mean, I was one of those Spurg boys. Like I was 2014. I was working at a managed futures fund. Like, why aren't we buying Bitcoin? And I'm spurging out as like a 22-year-old analyst, and everybody's like, shut the fuck up. And and I continued on that. Like I had my wife crying at brunches when she would come to visit because I'd be like, we're getting into Bitcoin, the global financial system's going to melt down, and I was that way for a while. But I think last 5 years, particularly, I pretty much chilled out, and whether it's with the media company that I have, the newsletter, and the podcast that I do, it's in terms of trying to convince others about Bitcoin. I don't do that anymore. People know I'm in Bitcoin, and they sometimes are like, all right, pitch me on Bitcoin. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like I produce all this content. Like if you really want to learn, like do the work, go learn. And then if you have some good questions later down the line, I'm here to answer, but I'm not going to tell you about the ills of central banking and try to walk you through 200 years of economic history and the history of money altogether. But that's why I think it is important to be calculated with how you approach teaching people or educating people about Bitcoin, because money is the most important tool that we use, and is hyper emotional for people because they don't want to admit that they've been duped.
It's funny. I mean, I came to this conclusion a long time ago. I don't know if you and I've talked about this, but when I finally really started to understand, when I started to do the thing about do the deep dive into money and into banking and central banking and all the rest of it, and accepted the basic premises. I said, I coined the phrase back then. I said, God created the world in 6 days, and the 7th day he rested, and the 8th day we created money. Man created money to get shit done. And money has taken a lot of forms over the years, but it's true. It is 1/2 of every transaction, but in the world we live in today, is 1/2 of every transaction that we engage in. And, every time you're buying something, you're selling dollars, or you're buying dollars, and, you're trading labor, and you're doing all these things. And the question then is, do you want to, or do you not want to live in a moral, in something approaching a moral society, where our individual rights and our individual property and all of those things are tied together? And it's like, and we don't have to be obnoxious about defending that position. And look, I've got the ruins of many a friendship on the cutting room floor of my life, because I spurged out over this shit. But that doesn't make it right. It is what it is. And then you learn, and then you realize that at some point you have to become a better communicator of these ideas. And you have to meet the other person halfway, and you have to figure out a way to talk to them in terms they understand. And that just shows empathy. And then when you're there and you get in that door, even if they reject you for years and years and years, it's fine, as long as you don't insult them and get crazy and do the thing. And eventually they either come around or they don't. And when they do, you don't say, I told you so. You say, welcome to the club. Glad you're here now. And never say it took you long enough. I mean, unless you know the person really well, and they're a bro. You can do that, but you do it jokingly while you hand them a whiskey and a cigar, and then we go into the back 40 and we light a fucking friggin' fire, and we hang out for the rest of the evening. You know what I mean? It's a very delicate thing, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's what I've found, particularly the last 3 years with inflation. That's a great entry point to drop a seed. You don't even mention Bitcoin. Sure. It's like people complaining about their grocery bills, the cost of housing, whatever. It's like, do you understand why this is happening? And then maybe you should look into all the money we've been printing, all the debt we've been going into, and then let that stoke some questions.
And then, and the funny part is, I don't know how you run into it, but of course I run into it at a level where I have to remind myself, they don't understand a thing about, they don't even know what a basis point is, dude. Shut the fuck up. Start at the basics and work your way forward. And I'm like, and he's like, oh no, really? I've got so much I want to unload on you. Or they ask a good question, and then you're like, oh shit, it's a good question, but it's like the frame of reference is all wrong. And now you've got to literally hog the microphone, filibuster for 20 minutes, and then metaphorically speaking, of course, we're talking about, and then do the thing, and then have your wife halfway through go, stop it. Yeah, dude, calm down. Let him speak. So I don't know.
That's probably part of the reason I changed my approach 5 years ago. Is my wife getting sick of me talking about Bitcoin at parties? Stop ruining the vibe, bro.
What I ran into for a long time was I was alienating everybody, including my wife, at one point about all the geopolitics and the corruption and the this and that, everything else, until after a while she actually started to engage with it, and she turned around and she went, "Holy shit's been right." And then and then when it became when we did and it was about the time we started Gold Goats and Guns, right? Because it became a necessity, because I didn't have the luxury of having a secondary income from anywhere. I no longer a chemist, just ranting in my laboratory, very house like or Sherlock Holmes like, screaming to the walls, and then Eureka on a Thursday and screaming in the walls Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of that week about the monetary system, or working for Newsmax. My first stint at Newsmax, I got to get it all out of my system that way. When it became like our business at home, she realized that she needed to give me, that I couldn't do it all by myself effectively. She took it on herself to really start approaching, learning things that she thought I needed to help me tell the story I needed to tell. And that's when she was like, "Holy Christ, you were right about everything." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." Thank you. Like, you know what I mean? And it's actually made life a little easier on our end. But no, my wife was always a little based, but now at this point, like, Camille is like fully gone. And
Same.
It makes life easy, actually.
Same. My wife was advertising. She worked deep in advertising in New York when we first met, and
right.
She is a completely different person from then to now. But like, to the point of like selling Bitcoin too, that's another thing. Like, I'd like to say I found my Bitcoin Zen, and like anybody who's out there spurging out trying to convince people, I think it would be important for them to internalize that Bitcoin sells itself too.
Yeah.
It really doesn't need you to go out there and do it. Like, the passage of time and more people independently coming to the same conclusions has happened historically, and I think is not only likely but more than likely than it was in the past to continue to happen. And as the protocol and the layers above it mature and the products around it mature, it really just sells itself. You don't really need to go shake people and say you should be buying Bitcoin.
Right. It's, lies are expensive. The truth sells itself. Right. It reminds me of, I'll tell you where the turn in my thinking in terms of being a communicator changed. Was again, I always go back to Dr. Gary North when he was writing for Lou Rockwell on a regular basis. And the late great Gary North reminded everybody, he said, "Look, so start a blog now, become an expert in something that you love. Doesn't matter what it is. Start a blog, write about it, or whatever you're going to do." And this is back in 2006, 2007. So we're like, there weren't a lot of avenues for us. YouTube was in its infancy, blah, 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 blah. But whatever, start a thing, become an expert in a thing. Everybody who isn't an expert in that thing will eventually come back to you when they are interested in that thing, and they will take your advice. So when they discover X, in this case, Bitcoin or gold or this or inflation or whatever it is, it could be underwater basket weaving, for Christ's sake, whatever it is, you're the local expert. And he was speaking specifically about politics as well. Like, you got a lot of friends who are not politically savvy, who are going to vote based on your recommendation because they just need someone who they respect to give them the TLDR as to what they should do, because they don't have time to become experts in everything. So they're an expert in something, you listen to them. You're an expert in something, they listen to you. Oh my God, communications happens.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I ended up here. I would not be here today if I didn't start a newsletter, blog, essentially. And that only started because in 2017, when the price of Bitcoin was going up, I'd been that annoying spurg for 3 or 4 years at that time. And for some reason or another, the price of Bitcoin going up got all those people. I was like, I remember Marty was telling me about Bitcoin a few years ago. And like May, and the price passed 1,000 again for the first time in a while, or April, May, sometime then. I got texts and emails, and it got overwhelming. I was like, you know what? I'll start a newsletter and write a little bit about Bitcoin, and here's how you'll learn. And just sent it to friends and family to start, and then shared the link on Twitter, and people picked it up, and people outside of that immediate group began reading, and then they wanted me to start a podcast, so I did that. And 7 years later, it's like, holy shit. If you would have told 25-year-old Marty I'd be here right now talking to Tom Luongo about all this shit, I'd be like, you're fucking nuts.
Well, I mean, if you had asked Tom Luongo in 2015 or 2016. I was having the same thing was happening to me when I was at Newsmax, and in 2014, 2015, people were asking me about it, and I kept saying the same. When it hit 100, right? And I was writing Resolute Wealth for them back then. I remember, writing a Bitcoin special report for a promotion we did for the newsletter, and everybody was like, really? I'm like, and I wrote the big story, and I said, look, it's going to go through 80 to 90% pump and dumps. It's going to do this, it's going to do that. I don't know if it's going to, I don't know what it's going to do. See, one of my biggest problems with Bitcoin, Marty, I'll be honest with you, is that by the time Bitcoin hit the scene, I had already been a kind of alternative money veteran and watched so many alternative money systems get the kibosh put on them. I was there when the Liberty Dollar got raided by the FBI. Like, I own Liberty Dollar. I still have certificates. I sell them every once in a while on eBay. I have like hundreds of ounces of ALDs, and I know they're worth good. I know they're worth good money today too, as well. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I was very skeptical of Bitcoin up front. I mean, that being said, I read the white paper. I wrote an article for Lou Rockwell back in July of 2010. I thought it was brilliant when I read it. I read the white paper. But then there was always part of me that was like, look, yeah, but this thing may not go anywhere. Like, it could just not go anywhere. I've seen this happen before. And so I was very kind of, I was kind of lackadaisical about it. I mined one of the first 50 blocks on a friggin' Intel CPU, for Christ's sake. I know what this looks like. That machine crashed, and I didn't. And did I keep those coins? No, they're gone. Like, I know they're gone. I know at least probably 100 Bitcoins I know that I personally wasted.
Yeah. Like, well, you weren't alone. Satoshi felt the same way. Like when WikiLeaks got cut off by PayPal and all the payment processors. I mean, that's one of Satoshi's most famous quotes is, let's not kick the hornet's nest. This protocol isn't ready for that type of attention. Like, he even knew it back then. And I think that's part of the miracle, is that it did survive those early years, because it could have easily been corrupted and stamped out in the first.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I wrote that article, right? I wrote that article. I discovered Bitcoin on the Daily Paul, as a matter of fact, like in the news feed on the old Ron Paul website, the Daily Paul. And I saw the link in there because that was part of my 10 websites I visited every day. Everybody has their 10 favorite websites they visit every day, right? Well, back then it was that. I saw this thing. I was actually working on, at the time, a creative writing project, a novel or whatever you want to call it, about like, I wanted to do like a foundation style series about the corruption of an uncorruptible money. So I was literally asked balls deep in designing my own incorruptible money. And then the Bitcoin white paper hit, and I read it and I went, oh shit, they did it. Right. I mean, that's serious. I'm not kidding. Like when and it was really funny. And I read it and I'm like, that's cool. And then so I wrote the article, but I remember that week there was a guy who was out there, literally said, this thing is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I'm going to 51% attack it, and I'm going to fork the blockchain, and I'm going to take it over. And he attacked the hell out of the thing. He's like, I'm the network guy. So he like literally like pulled all the hashing power, all the machines, the dead computing power in his network that he had available to him, and went after it, and it failed miserably, quickly. And I was like, huh. Interesting. Cool. I mean, that was literally my response. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. Good to know. This thing already, like 0.36 beta was the wallet, at that point, like it was it. That was all that was there. Like, it was nothing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting to get in that perspective, your perspective, like in that point of time that you're in. Because I saw Bitcoin, I immediately believed in it, because I was a child of the great financial crisis in 2008. Right. I was a senior in high school taking an elective economics class. Funnily enough, went to an all-guys prep school, and they offered that, and I decided to take it. And luckily for me, our professor was like pretty on it. He saw the great financial crisis as an opportunity to really like lean into economics 101 from an Austrian perspective. I was lucky that he was of the Austrian purview as well.
You are lucky.
And that's what sent me down the track. Like, that class really impacted me. That year really affected me, my family. My dad's job was affected by it, and so I had this teenage angst and anger at the system, and went to college with a know your enemy mentality, studied economics, and then when I stumbled upon Bitcoin 3 or 4 years into college, I was like, oh shit, this is it, and was immediately all in. It was between that class and the time I discovered Bitcoin, you had WikiLeaks, you had Snowden, Aaron Schwartz, all this stuff going on, and it was just like, the system is fucked. We need an alternative. And this peer-to-peer digital cash system immediately connected with me. Like, oh shit, this is what I want to focus on from here on out.
Yeah, no, I was still very much in the I mean, I understood it. It's funny, like, and I've talked about this in the past, like, because I was the first guy to really, talk about Bitcoin, in that circle. I had multiple members of, multiple senior fellows at the Mises Institute, guys whose articles you've read, emailed me behind the scenes and asked me questions about Bitcoin. And I answered them as obviously as I could. I tend to want to believe that I was the first guy on the Bitcoin forums to really sit down and do a Mises' regression theorem analysis of Bitcoin. I thought it passed immediately and said, okay, now it's up to the people themselves as to whether or not it's going to take root and do its thing. And having been down this path and knowing how hard it would be to get up climb that mountain, I just watched it climb a wall of worry. And then when what happened to me, and I'll be honest with you, is that I lost about 200 Bitcoin. And I've talked about this in the past, on Mt. Gox, and it wasn't from Mt. Gox being imploded or it had nothing to do with that. It just simply, I got a keylogger and the guy got my Mt. Gox password and stole my Bitcoins. And since they were held on chain at that point, they were gone and there was nothing anybody could do about it. But, and I'm not grousing about it. I'm just telling the story. But what happened to me was that I just said, from 2012 to 2014, I was like, yeah, whatever about Bitcoin. I was angry. I'll be honest with you. I was angry and depressed about what happened, and I didn't jump back in again. And I'm like, oh, well, we'll see what happens. But my life was also a mess at that point, in a lot of other ways. So this was nothing. It's almost like it happened to me at the exact worst time in my life. Because had I been in a better frame of mind personally, I probably would have been like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to go buy another $200 worth of Bitcoin and get right back on the horse, and it wouldn't have been hard, right? But that's not what happened. So, yeah,
there's I get nauseous thinking about the stupid. Like, I spent Bitcoin on stupid stuff. Like, I bought a pair of shoes. 20 Coinbase came out with a debit card. I bought a pair of shoes. It was a quarter of a Bitcoin. I spent a Bitcoin on a computer, the 21 Co computer, to learn about Bitcoin mining. And it's littered with that. And that is the other thing to it is. There's a lot of scorned lovers within Bitcoin's history that
fair enough,
but it's still early in my mind. And then going back to Bitcoin surviving and working, I just want to bring it up. And I didn't do this in preparation of this conversation. I just, for some reason or another, there's one pivotal blog post that was written about Bitcoin in 2011 that has really helped center my frame of Bitcoin and why it is successful. And it's Gwern's Bitcoin is Worse is Better. And that's the other thing that I think really holds people back from jumping into Bitcoin, because they look at the actual technical design of the network and how clunky it is and how many things it smashes together. And there's no way all this can work. And Gwern's piece, which very prescient, wrote in 2011, basically is no, Bitcoin plays to the is worse is better theory, which is you just get something that can work. It's a little you don't understand why there's 10-minute blocks. Why are they choosing SHA-256, hashcash SHA-256 as their hashing algorithm? Why is it pseudonymous and not fully anonymous? All these things are viewed as shortfallings, but combined together, it's just good enough to get the system that you need. And that frustrates particularly the cryptographers and the hardcore cypherpunks who were thinking about all these ideas leading up to Bitcoin. They have a natural aversion because they look at it and this design is terrible, and it's just bad enough that it actually works.
Well, yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I've actually, I remember Elon Musk talking about how Bitcoin is like really crappy technology, and I've always said that I've always thought it was alpha code that went viral, right? But we went back and those are valid perspectives in one way or another. But another equally valid perspective is a version of what you just said, which is that actually all of those shortcomings, it being slow or transactionally not dense and this, that, and that actually works to its advantage as a store of value that doesn't move. Bitcoin, like gold, like one of the good things about gold is that it's hard to move around. It's hard to subdivide, but it's also hard to move around, which means that you don't spend gold unless you absolutely need to spend gold. And one of the reasons why, or change out what you do with gold, because it's hard to move. And that means that there's costs associated with moving it or selling it or buying it or this or that. And because of those things, that limits its velocity, and that lack of velocity is a thing, and that's a market attribute that can be leveraged towards a specific goal. Bitcoin doesn't have to be all things to all people. This is one of the fundamental problems, I think, with the dollar. We went for not only the reserve asset, the store of value, but the unit of account and the medium of exchange. It doesn't have to be all three of those things. And Bitcoin, it's actually against its advantage to be all three of those things. Then you wind up with what we've got now, which is Triffin's paradox. Take it to Bitcoin or gold. Gold can be the store of value. It can be a version of the unit of account. It doesn't need to be a medium of exchange, right? We can have shit coins for being the mediums of exchange or whatever we need in this digital ecosystem. We can have those other things, and then Bitcoin can continue to do what it needs to do, which is to be the ultimate form of collateral for the entire fucking system. And I think that's where I've come down is I think what Bitcoin's real power is. And then again, back to all of its attributes that make it look like, well, it's just shitty alpha code, but maybe not.
Well, so I guess we disagree here, and where I think Bitcoin can do all those things and is already, and we're doing it in layers. At the protocol layer, definitely, it's not going to make sense to use Bitcoin as a transactional currency. It's better to view Bitcoin at the protocol layer and compare it to central bank settlements, where at scale down the line, if you're making an on-chain transaction, you're essentially settling between two large counterparts. It's not going to be buying your groceries or things like that. But I think one thing that this Bitcoin as a digital currency, as a digital bearer instrument, really brings to market that's never existed and will play in its favor as a medium of exchange at scale. And we're already beginning to see the beginning nation stages of this arise, is the fact that you do have literal technical network effects that exist. And on top of those network effects, interoperability is important. And so if you're going to be, so a great example, podcasting 2.0, like I'm able to put a Bitcoin address in my RSS feed, and it's not protocol level Bitcoin, it's over the Lightning Network, and people can download a podcasting app like Fountain, load up the wallet, and they can do value for value and send me Bitcoin as they listen and boost. And that's just like one rudimentary example. But you can think of a world in which, if AI is not all hype and there is some bite behind actual use cases and an addition of exponential productivity growth to the economy, and you do have something like AI agents come to market, like you're going to need those agents to have a currency, and they're most likely going to choose Bitcoin because if they're going to be exchanging value on the internet, they're going to want to make sure they're doing it with a good money that is stable value. And Bitcoin's certainly not stable value yet, but you could imagine at scale, mass adoption, you get to that relatively low volatility point of low volatility, and then due to the interoperable nature of like the applications that you build on top of Bitcoin, like that technical network effect is going to essentially force Bitcoin as a medium of exchange because of what you can build. Like you like think of the world in which you're spending shitcoins for different things on the internet. They're not necessarily interoperable with each other, and like the mental cost and the technical cost that comes with trying to build for all those different shitcoins just becomes too expensive and too burdensome.
I mean, no, these are all really good points, and these are arguments that I've always been open to. I just refuse to ever say it's going to happen. I won't say that, but I'm like, I'd be happy to go, yeah, I hope it does happen, or if it does happen, cool, and I'm happy to be wrong, or any of those things. But again, just from and again, Bitcoin can hold different roles. Again, the point about the payment layer versus the protocol layer, I think, is a very important one. I was mostly talking at the protocol layer, certainly. And all I want to say here is that, like, at different stages of its evolution, it's going to do different things, right? And that's another part of the conversation. And again, will it do all of that? I hope so, because that points towards a better world. Right. To the people in the audience that still think that there's some validity to some argument about there not being any, what happens if the grid goes down? Well, I don't care. I don't even want gold when the grid goes down.
Yeah.
Like I want the other two things in the name of this podcast.
Yeah. That's when you need your guns and your goats.
Yeah. I want tins of sardines and I want toilet paper. I don't know about you, but like, these are the things that I know I'm going to want liquor. I'm going to want the things that I'm going to want access to a fishing hole, right? Yeah. That I can defend. Like these are when you start talking about the breakdown of society, when you start arguing that level in order to argue against Bitcoin, I'm like, well, that's a nice straw man. But what you're saying is that you're not going to be here to matter, because I know for a fact, like you're 65 years old arguing against Bitcoin, like you're not going to survive the grid going down. unless you've got an army of grandchildren in their 20s that are going to be willing to take care of you. Like, because at that point we're going to need people. We're not going to need money.
Yeah,
we're going to need money after civilization reasserts itself. So, like, again, we're not going to want gold at that point. I probably actually want junk silver if I wanted that kind of thing. I'm going to need something small, fungible, tangible that I can move around. We're going to live off in that scenario, we'd live off the guts of the old world for decades, right? Yeah. Before we ever, start to like put everything back together again, depending on how much knowledge is lost in the process. So please don't make other arguments. They actually just betray, not you personally. This is the royal view. This is people in the audience. Don't make those arguments in public. It just makes you look dumb.
Yeah.
Like, frankly.
It's like actually, if the grid goes down, Bitcoin sucks. Like, okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Good okay. Point. Fine.
I'll give you that one. But no, going back to something you said.
Okay, so what did you prove? Nothing.
Yeah. Going back to something you said that like Bitcoin suiting different use cases at different points in time. Like it's totally true. It's been proven throughout Bitcoin's history. And again, ties back to what we were saying earlier about spurging out about selling Bitcoin. And that's one thing I think another part of the reason why I'm not like hard selling Bitcoin to people as I was back in the day. Right. Because you had bad narratives in the past, and who knows if the narrative that rules the day today is a bad narrative. Like people thought Bitcoin was going to be this at the protocol level was going to be cheap. Like it was pitched as this distributed currency that had no fees. It's just not the case. It was the case back then when nobody was using it, but as more people use it, you find out that block space is scarce and you have to compete for block space by attaching a fee to your transaction. And all of a sudden Bitcoin's not, it was never fast. That was always false marketing, but it's certainly not cheap as well. That's just something to be aware of. Like have the humility to recognize that you're watching a network develop right in front of your eyes. You're not going to understand fully how it will operate at scale and at different points in time.
Right. No, it's perfectly reasonable. Like that's, and it's fun to, and from my perspective, it's like, it's the fact that you and I could sit here and have this conversation and say back in the day versus when it comes to Bitcoin, that's pretty freaking hilarious, to be honest with you. When you stop to think about that, oh, back in the day, when I had hair, like it's that kind of thing. Dudes, we're 15 years into this now, and it's not a small thing anymore. And I'm not going to be doctrinaire about this. I don't know. I know that in the current zeitgeist and the current, makeup of the global monetary system and the global political arena and everything else, that look, at the state actor level, gold is still the thing. Like it is. And Bitcoin is this thing that they're, they'll adopt slowly. And even if they're not averse to it, even if you have somebody like, for example, you have somebody like Putin over in Russia, who's not averse to Bitcoin. He's not against Bitcoin, but like, he's not going to run his country. He's not going to run his country's reserves on it. No, he's going to demand gold. He's not stupid. Like this is the dominant, like we're moving away from debt and foreign exchange reserves and back to a hard asset. We're going to go to gold first. Then we're going to, and we're going to watch Bitcoin slide itself into that system, into that next version of the system. And that's perfectly reasonable. Bitcoin gets to prove itself while we go through another round of monetary, we go through this period of monetary instability, which is clearly on the case, but don't kid yourself. Like, you're right in that it's early, but we may not see the Bitcoin nirvana until you're my age or older. Yeah. And wouldn't that be a fucking great world that Bitcoin survives that long? We survive that long, given the current circumstances, to be able to have that conversation and look back and go, Tom and Marty, they were kind of on to something.
Yeah. No, that's like
the long view.
And many people would be like, oh, it's too long. But like, no, like if that does happen, that's a great outcome. Sure. And if that does happen, that means that Bitcoin is monetized significantly. And if you're looking at, if you want nation state adoption now and it doesn't happen, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you think and have conviction in Bitcoin's long-term thesis, you should view that as an opportunity. Like, hey, I get to accumulate more Bitcoin.
They're going to keep selling the Bitcoin they stole from other people, and they're going to distribute it back to us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just say thank you and shut up. Like, enjoy it.
Yeah, and again, going back to why I like that conference, the Baltic Honey Badger conference in Latvia, is really drives home the importance of individual agency. And like, there's a lot of the industry that, it's not even the industry, a lot of Bitcoiners who, this is not to denigrate anybody for not doing this, but I do think like a point of introspection is like, if you want that, like you have to go build it. Accumulating Bitcoin is one way to get there faster, but that's part of the reason why I helped start a venture fund focused on investing in Bitcoin companies and infrastructure at 1031, is because if you do envision a world in which you want mass Bitcoin adoption and a Bitcoin standard, like there's literal infrastructure, physical and software infrastructure that needs to be built out. And you can't just preach Bitcoin and expect it to materialize. Like shit has to get done. Capital needs to be allocated. Businesses need to be started. Infrastructure needs to be built. And again, going back to that conference, it's like core focus is like, all right, we can talk about this, but like, how are we actually going to build it?
That's right. Well, this is why I'm no longer a member of the Libertarian Party.
Yeah. The libertarians, just exactly like that's, if any Bitcoiners are listening to this, that's something we have to desperately try to stave off, is falling into that libertarian bear trap of just talking about what is morally superior and not actually effectuating that change in the real world.
That's right. And this is part of that conversation that it's not a hobby anymore, folks. It's $1 trillion industry or more. And, it's now, if you want it, you have to build it and you have to go out and get it. And the opportunity is laying there for you to go do it and go prove it. Like this is one of the things that, like, hanging out on Twitter and, in reinforcing the orthodoxy just gets you blocked. I ran into a couple of guys like this last week, and they were giving me shit for not being, they were being dickheads because they knew I wasn't a maxi, and they were just playing dumb and being stupid. And eventually they came out and said, well, I don't know, we don't, what's the word I'm looking for? No quarter for those that don't fully get it. I'm like, oh, I fully get it, dude. All you're doing is getting yourself blocked. This is a path to getting blocked. I'm sitting here trying to have a rational conversation with you about the limitations of where things are right now, and you're just being douchebags because you think it's cute. I'm like, great, happy to, if I was a lesser person or if I was lesser committed to Bitcoin than you think I am, I would have already blocked you and would have never bought another Bitcoin and would have told another 1,000 people or 10,000 people not to invest in it because the people who are involved in it are douchebags like you. And the one guy, and one of them came back and went, yeah, dude, I'm sorry about that. You're right. And the other guy was still being a dick. I'm like, you get blocked, you get to stay, and we get to continue to have a conversation because that's what ultimately this is about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I can say, like, again, having been one of those people in the past, and I still have my troll replies, but it's typically I save those for politicians and stupid journalists. Which
exactly, that's who deserves it.
Yeah, exactly. That's who it. That's who I hold the troll responses for. But in sugar, I understand where these people, like, once you see it and you think it can happen, it is hard not to get like insanely become like an insane zealot around it. Like I remember that feeling I had back in 2013, 2014 when I was going full bore in. It's like it is true. Like, you figure it out. It's like this fucking light bulb goes out, and you fucking stay up for 2 weeks reading everything you can about it, and you do want to physically shake people awake. Like, hey, have you seen this thing? Like you said earlier.
Yeah,
meeting people where they are is very important. And conversation. That's why I love having you on the show, because I know we can have this type of conversation, and that's part of the strategy of the show the last 3 years particularly, is reaching out to individuals like yourself who are either get it but a bit skeptical or completely skeptical, and just being like, hey, let's have a conversation. I'm not going to come in and bite your head off because you don't like Bitcoin.
Let me put it to you this way. My skepticism of Bitcoin is just part of my natural skepticism about everything. But I am absolutely, if you want my honest opinion, in my heart of hearts, I want Bitcoin to win. In my heart of hearts, I am a Bitcoin maxi. But I'm not going to show it to you, or I'm not going to argue that in public on purpose, because it's important that you constantly error check your own perspective. It's a method, and it's one in which and I'll be honest with you, Marty, and I do this, this is part of what you see publicly is my partner Dexter White says all the time, you have a character? Like, you have a character you play? You're not just like being Tom ranting. I'm like, no, I do. And that the real Tom is like, oh no, fuck Bitcoin. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to win. Right. And then there's the other part of me is like, no, that's not the persona. That's not the thing. You have to you have to remind yourself, because at the end of the day, you could be fucking wrong. And I've been wrong enough in my life about a lot of things that I thought I was right about to go, you know what? Prove to me, or think about this part of it, and think about that part of it. Like, I would prefer to be a proof of work maxi than necessarily a Bitcoin maxi, simply because I don't know what technology is coming down the pike tomorrow. I don't, and I don't want to put myself in a position to say I'm the guy who has the answer. This is the end of of money's technology. I'm like, really? Huh? Okay. A lot of I have horseshoe salesmen to introduce you to, and I have steam engine guys to introduce you to, and blah 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 blah. Like technology doesn't end, innovation doesn't end. It's always a process of continual improvement. And is Bitcoin one of those things that can keep rolling with the punches? Can it be our monetary solution for the next so many hundreds of years? Yes, maybe. I don't know. I'd love for it to be. It would be far better than the bullshit we have now. And I'm good with Pareto, folks. I don't need it to be perfect. I just need it to be better.
No, I mean, that's why I love working in an industry, because it really does I'm pot committed, socially, financially, professionally. Like, if Bitcoin fails, I'm pretty fucked. And so whether
you're young,
whether it's the show, and like now I have a bigger audience, and people are coming to learn about Bitcoin, and that's a lot of responsibility with 1031 and the funds. We're raising capital from LPs, and deploying that, and they're basically depending on us to make good decisions about where that capital should be allocated, which dictates that you really have to think about where Bitcoin is, how it can succeed, how it can fail. And the point of all this being is like being in the industry, and I think that really forces you to ask those hard questions. And I think at the end of the day, it does give Bitcoin, not just by me doing this, but a collective of individuals really dedicating their life to the industry, does give it a good chance at success.
Agreed.
It's not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy. It's not going to get any easier. You're going to have way more uncomfortable conversations.
I was going to say nothing worth having is easy. Are you kidding? Like, I feel the same exact way about what it is that I'm doing at a geopolitical and in my intersection of the world, right? What I'm actually supposedly good at in this space, what I bring to the table is, and there's a responsibility. You've got all these people that you've curated. You've got this audience that you've curated, and these people that you're in effect shepherding. You're like, it's a big responsibility, and it's akin to becoming a father for the first time. It's akin to all of those things where now all of a sudden your life isn't yours anymore. You don't live just for yourself. I mean, if it was just my fucking money, like, yeah, I'll go buy some Bitcoin. But it's not just my money. It's not just it's not just me anymore. And with that comes the responsibility. If you take it seriously, if you care about it, and you care about the people that you've curated, and what's the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing? Like, we're here to make the world a better freaking place, right? Yeah. And doing it the best way we know how.
No, I think we've discussed this on my show. Like, I do think we are having a net positive benefit, net positive effect on the world. Like, it's not only our shows or conversations that we've had, but you look at particularly in independent media, everybody that's popped up in the last 10 years. I do think, I mean, I know you've been talking about this on the show. Like, I think it's beginning to be expressed at the geopolitical level, particularly here in the United States, leading up to this election. You see one party adopting the posturing of this dark corner of the internet that's been shouting some of these thoughts for 5-10 years now.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be. It's going to be really, it's going to be an interesting time, man. I think we're going to wind up in a very interesting acceleration effect to kind of wrap this up in some way, of both good things and bad things, right? I don't know how you see it, but I definitely can see the acceleration of the bad guys, right? But at the same time, that puts pressure on the good guys to do the, for lack of a better term, and I'm not a big fan of good guys and bad guys, but people on the right side of the morality play and people on the wrong side of the morality play. And pressure and action creates opposite reactions. And it's going to be very interesting to see how we respond to what they're going to do to us. And then, is Bitcoin strong enough to assist us in that process? I think it is. It's why I advocate for it. I think gold is still strong enough to help us along those lines as well. And that's why I'm agnostic about both of them. And by the way, I think the dollar still has some value in helping us with that as well. Oh, by the way, but it all depends on, what vector and what threat you're talking about. And there are multiple vectors and there are multiple threats. And so, stay flexible.
Stay flexible. And these are all technical tools that we have at our disposal to fight back against the immoral people with like full control over our lives. And it's, again, why I love your show and the community that you've developed and the community we've developed over at TFTC Rabbit Hole Recap is that, I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm sure you have, like over the 7 years of doing the different podcasts, like I've had people walk up to me like, hey, I was just some dude sitting isolated with these thoughts. And like, you gave me the peace of mind knowing I'm not crazy, the only one with these thoughts. And then there has been this trend that I've seen over the years of people like instilling confidence in people. I think putting these ideas out there, not being afraid to, that's beyond, like, we certainly need Bitcoin, gold, the dollar to an extent to fight back against these forces, but the most potent tool, I think, is just instilling confidence in people to speak up and say, I'm not fucking taking this shit anymore.
No, that's exactly right. These are, I said earlier, I invoked the wife earlier in helping me get started Gold Coats and Guns off the ground. When I decided to go that route, we want to talk about a thing that gave me confidence to go forward with this. Like at that moment, that's when my wife stepped up and really, really did the hard work. And that's what we do here is, ultimately that's what we get to have. And that gave me the confidence to stick it out through the lean times. It gave me the confidence to keep going and inspire other people. And, to bring them to you, to bring them in more appropriately. And I started with just like live streams and, ranting with my hat on and, screaming into a microphone, half drunk, sometimes half just drunk off my ass, and like doing the thing and then just curating the right audience and having a conversation back and forth with them. And eventually, that just kind of, you hone your skill, you hone the writing, you get better at the stuff. And the process of continuous improvement, if you have anything to say, eventually you're going to figure out how to say it well. You're going to find that audience, you're going to do the thing, and you're going to create the next generation. As people like Gary North and Lou Rockwell and others inspired me, and Philip K. Dick and all these other people who they're back here up on my shelf and behind me, inspired me to become the person that I am today. I'm going to pay that. I'm hoping that it blossoms the next round of that. So every time, like every time I get I get an email or an IM or a DM from one of my patrons, is like, I know you're really busy, but do you have the time to like read something I wrote? I'm like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Give me an honest critique. I will. I will not. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to give you I'm going to give you the raw dope because you need that to go forward. And then we're going to go forward. And if you're starting a podcast, great. I'll be a guest. If I can do this, if I can help in any way, I will. And if you don't want my help, that's fine. That's great. Go thou forth and become better at this. And when we see our work reflected back at us, that's the greatest, far more than the freaking money. The money is nothing. The money is just the means by which to continue to do this tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I mean, very similar origin story. And it wasn't my wife, but it was my father. God rest his soul. But none of this would be here if he didn't basically plant the idea in my mind. My 26th birthday, showed up to Brooklyn. At that point, I was a year and a half unemployed. I'd left finance to really try to figure out how to break into tech, and newly married. My wife, God bless her, married me a year into my unemployment, and pretty down on the dumps. 26, like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? Bitcoin was pumping. I was getting all these texts, and he was actually the one who was like, when you were at the fund, you used to write the letters and the commentary. Like, you can write. You should write about Bitcoin. I was like, you know what, Dad? I got nothing else to do. And then started it a few days later, and here we are. But instilling confidence. He instilled that confidence in me when I was at one of the lowest points of my life. Like, you can do this.
Yeah, that's it. I'm really glad to hear that you had your dad was there for you at that moment when you needed him. Really pleased for you to hear that, because my dad died when I was 25. And my dad was my hero in many ways. And the best thing that anybody said to me in the past 5 years was, I think my nephew said to me one day, who's a Bitcoin guy and an entrepreneur and good kid. He's 40. He's a good kid, right? He said, "Grandpa Pat would be proud of you." And I went, "Thanks. I appreciate that." And that's where you are. Like, there's a lot in this, in what we do. There's a lot of who we are in what we do. And I don't know, like, sometimes you wake up and you go, I don't know what else I'm going to do with my life. I'm not employable in these other, I might as well try this shit. And then you realize, oh, okay, maybe I am doing it. And you just pour your heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, it's, shout out to the good dads out there. Yeah. My dad passed away last year, young. He was only 54. It was a big kick in the dick. And, it's Yeah, same to you. But that's life, and I'm a father now. Sorry, I got fire. But no, as a father now, like that's
congratulations.
That's how I want to make my dad proud, is if I could have any effect on my son's life the way he did in mine. Like that's success, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. No. Like my daughter just graduated high school. She's having a little problem getting started, but she'll get there. She'll figure it out. I know she will. And and Camille and I will, we'll give her every opportunity to succeed that she can. But it's ultimately going to be her choice. And we know what her, we know what the problems are for her. Yeah. And we'll and our goal is to, as we both said from the beginning, from the moment after she was born, it's like we endeavor to make different mistakes than our parents. That's the best we can do, right? So if we can just make different mistakes than our parents, we'll be okay, because we're not going to not make mistakes. So, but as long as she knows that she has a place that she's always going to get, constructive criticism and the right kick in the ass at the right moment in time, and the right advice. They may not, and that's the other thing, is that they may not listen to you the first 4 or 5 times you say it. They may not even hear it until they're 25. But say it anyway.
Yeah.
Don't say it in such a way that doesn't belittle them, and give them the courage and give them the strength to go out there and do what needs to be done. And we'll be okay. And it's the same thing for, Bitcoin advocates, the same thing for everybody. So,
yeah. That's
what you do.
Yeah. Sorry, somebody's house is on fire here. But, that's the other, like, again, that's part of the reason I love talking to you. Like, people have different views.
Mm-hmm.
People do not think the same exact way as anybody else, and you just have to accept that and find the middle ground, and remember that at the end of the day, most people outside of politics are humans who want to see good happen in the world, and show some grace and meet people where they are. And
yep, do your best. You can always, we live in this age where we're all supposed to hate each other for having disagreements. And that's a function of the amount of anxiety that they pimp at us every day. Because the more people feel uncertain and uneasy about their future, the less tolerance they have. Their time horizons shorten, their time preference shortens, right? As to put it in Austrian terms, to put it in all the way back to the beginning. And you have to realize that that's what you're dealing with. And people have, they have trigger points, and sometimes you have to and it's hard, and I'm terrible at it. And I have to remind myself every once in a while, no, back up. No, back up, back off, start again.
Yeah.
Restart the conversation, calm down, do the thing, give them help. I have younger friends who are looking for directions, and they turn to me for guidance and support. And I'm like, okay, let's do the thing. What we got? And, whatever it happens to be. And, you give them the best, help that they can, the best guidance that you can. And then, and you hope that they, that it all works out for them. And, we're not going to get through this. Bitcoin is not going to save us from these evil assholes. Gold is not going to save us from these evil assholes. We're going to save each other from these evil assholes. Those other things are just tools by which to get the things that we need to get us there. So this is why there's no point in arguing gold versus Bitcoin, Democrat versus Republican, this, that. It doesn't matter. We have to realize where the evil lies. We have to realize that there are flawed heroes and understandable villains and all the rest of it. And we have to just make our way as best as possible, and retain our empathy and our humanity. And, and when we come across something that, we're not quite sure of, then that's hard in these day and age. I get it. I'm as guilty of not having empathy on a daily basis as anybody. Just talk to me when I'm, you don't want to be in the car with me during traffic. It's bad. It's awful. I'm a horrible person, but
Now the young guns like myself are lucky to have you and others like you helping guide the way. Because honestly, I would not be where I am without reaching out to people like yourself for advice when needed. The gray beards in the room. That's I think one thing millennials, Gen Z, need to leverage more. There's again, going back to division, like ageist division, boomers, Gen X versus millennials, Gen Z. It's like everybody's an individual, and there's many out there who have wisdom and value to share that you should take advantage of.
I learned from a lot of people younger than myself. Like I do but and I learned from people still that are older than me, and I do my best to I don't have any answers here, guys. We're all doing our very best to provide a framework with which to understand what's happening around us, tell a story. Hopefully that story carries a lesson that you can go, and a germ of truth that you can go forward with, and then make a better decision tomorrow with. And hopefully we can save you time so that you can put that time forward towards the things that matter to you. And hopefully that what matters to you is your family, your community, your children, your well-being and your future. And you don't make bad decisions. You don't make all the same mistakes that we did.
Yeah. Well, I hope I helped give your audience a better framework of Bitcoin, how to think of it. It's always hard doing these, trying to explain Bitcoin. I've been trying to do it for 11 years now, and it's never easy.
No, what I'll say is this, Marty. Certainly the first half of this podcast, and we'll wrap it up here. Was a nice little re-up / primer. I hate to use the phrase re-education, but but it's kind of, in some ways it kind of is for me, because again, Bitcoin at that level has not been something I have spent a lot of time thinking about in the last 3 or 4 years. I've had to chase other stories and just think of Bitcoin as one asset in a bigger story, and it is good to sit down and have a tighter conversation about what Bitcoin could possibly be and what it should do and how it can change the world for the better.
Yeah. I go an inch wide, mile deep. So if anybody listens to this, wants to learn more, feel free to hop in my DMs.
All righty. With that said, Marty, glad that you decided to brave the jet lag from your trip and catch up with me and the audience. And we'll do this again soon. I'm really glad that you decided to stop by.
It was a pleasure and an honor. I can't wait to do it again.
All righty, man. We'll do it. All right. Take care. Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 191 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. I want to thank Marty Bent for his time and his just general Martiness. I really like Marty, just personally. It's always just a good chat. And, I give millennials a hard time on a regular basis, but Marty's one of those guys that, gives me a little bit of hope for the future. So with that said, I'm out. As always, you can follow me on my blog at tomluongo.me or goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, and you can sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, and you can get both the twice weekly market reports and the monthly newsletter where we put all this together with some bespoke research, all original writing, and a full-on portfolio strategy to help you try and make sense of and maybe make a little money in this world going mad. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. And keep your stick on the ice.